Done.
Jamie, you live in the UK. If you had a tarmac rally car and needed somewhere to shake it down, where would you recommend?
Well, I'd recommend the Bont Rally stage owned by Slip and Grip Automotive, Gillian.
That's right. Slip and Grip Automotive are a UK-based motorsport event organizer and members club. They host various events throughout the year at a number of locations, including track days, sprints, and tarmac rally testing. They're the sole organisers for the Bont Rally stage in Mid Wales, a great tarmac stage providing great prep for crews before tarmac events in the UK or Ireland. To find out more, visit slipandgripautomotive.co.uk. The link is in the description of this episode, and make sure to follow them on Instagram and Facebook. I think you'll agree, they're a great bunch of lads. Jamie, how are you doing this week? Enjoying the sunshine?
I was enjoying the sunshine before it buggered off at the start of the week. So yeah, I mean certainly at the weekend was grand, mate, absolutely. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad. It hasn't quite left us yet, so it's quite stifling in my bedroom slash recording studio today. But perhaps no hotter than what the crews experience on an Italian World Rally Championship
Nicely done.
round. Yeah, slipped that one in nicely. That was pure off the cuff as well. I hadn't written that in.
Don't lie, I can see the post-its falling off behind
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. So this week we have a great show lined up, another in our retrospective series once again, following our limitation of choosing only rounds from our lifetime. This week will be a little different as both our choices are vastly different events, as of course Rally Italy's home has moved to the island of Sardinia since 2004. And though Sardinia has had some great rallies play out there over the years, I think amongst rally fans you would have to look hard for someone who doesn't lust after its former home in Sanremo.
Yes. I even chanced on a Dervish article from 2020 while doing some research for this episode, imploring rally fans to basically stop living in the past and idolizing Rally Sanremo and to embrace Rally Sardinia. It's like, well, nice try, but you know.
I think there's probably a generation or two of us has to pass before that happens. Which doesn't say anything necessarily negative about Sardinia because it's actually a cracking location and has put up some great stuff. But yeah, Sanremo is mega cool.
That's it. That's it. It's the youth thing, isn't it? Or as you say, it's the nostalgic memories.
Yeah, we still haven't quite taken off those rose tinted glasses. So in that case, then Jamie, as you've chosen the Sanremo, one of the Sanremo rounds, why don't you lead us away? What year have you chosen?
Absolutely. I've chosen the 2001 running of Rally Sanremo, largely because of the season in which it took place. That year has obviously passed into rallying legend as one of the most hotly contested in the modern era. While it would be wrong to suggest that the Italian round played a decisive role in the eventual outcome of the championship, the fact that none of the title protagonists scored especially highly helped to ensure that the battle went down to the wire in the RAC. The topsy-turvy nature of that season meant that Colin McRae and Tommy Mäkinen went to Italy tied for the championship lead with 40 points apiece, with Richard Burns, while Richard Burns had managed to haul his way back into title contention through victory in New Zealand a couple of weeks previously. Burns sat 9 points adrift of the leading pair, just a single point ahead of Carlos Sainz in fourth, the Spaniard's legendary consistency helping him to stay in contention despite having not troubled the top step of the podium all year long. As we'll see, this was a very weird rally. The title protagonists were pretty much rendered bit part players at best, while the immensely high rate of attrition meant that anyone who merely reached the end would likely be well rewarded. It was also a rally of three distinct phases, the first of which saw Pinizzi battling Jesus Puris, and I will end up calling him Jesus at some point, but we'll stick with Jesus for now. Jesus Puris The second with Panizzi squabbling with Didier Auriol, and on the third and final leg, having to do the same again against the resurgent Sebastien Loeb and in the fog. So yeah, very much a case of France's old rallying guard trying to fend off the new generation. And you could argue that perhaps this is the event when maybe it would be too far to say the torch was passed from one generation to another, but it was certainly, I think, the last gasp of the old tarmac generation. Although one of those things you could only see with the benefit of hindsight. And also, this is a really one thing that struck me was how good looking this rally was. And I know that, as you say, rose tinted specs. I think I wear rose tinted contact lenses most of the time. And also I have, if anyone listening to this will know, I have no ability to judge the passage of time and think that any event from 25 yeyears ago feels like 2 minutes ago. But this one really did. Just watching the silver and red 206 WRCs really did transport me right back. Staggering to believe it's over 20 years ago now. So yeah, I think all in all, a cracking rally, cracking location, and let's see if we can get back there one day.
I think any hope of that has probably long past, but we can but dream. And for especially to arrive there with the selection of entries and quality of cars and how good looking, as you say, we know what was there. It was cracking, wasn't it? It was a great year in terms of the overall entries and what that generation of World Rally car looked like. Especially in, obviously, tarmac trim is always better looking, but with few exceptions, but they always looked even a bit more at home in Sanremo for some reason.
And of course, a bumper crop of Super 1600s and things like that. So, yes, that year's Rally Sanremo consisted of 3 legs with a combined competitive mileage of 368 kilometers spread over 20 stages. Leg 1 totaled 138.45 kilometers, leg 2 142 kilometers, and leg 3 87.6 kilometers. In terms of teams and drivers, we had, of course, Peugeot with Marcus Gronholm, Didier Auriol, Gilles Panizzi, and Harry Rovanperä. Peugeot, of course, had won here with Panizzi and Delacour the previous year, albeit in famously contentious circumstances, thanks to the latter accusing the former of the illegal wrecking, and then Panizzi looking at Delacour so hard that he had to go off and have a bit of a moment. Yes. And in 2001, the team clearly hoped for a repeat of this result, and as such, it had nominated Panizzi and Auriol to score manufacture points, leaving Gronholm and Rovanperä to do the best they could. Subaru had Richard Burns, Petter Solberg, Marco Martin, and Toshio Arai. And given how it ended up, it's easy to forget just how piecemeal Subaru's 2001 season looked. It really was only thanks to Burns' ability to score points in metronomic fashion that helped him save the day. And of course, his win in New Zealand would prove to be his only win of the year and the springboard to his ultimate success. But neither he nor Subaru were feeling especially confident going to the final duo of tarmac events of 2001, the one following this being, of course, the Tour de Corse. In Italy, Burns and Solberg were nominated to score points with Marco Martin and Arai there to gather data and make up the numbers. And over at M Sport Ford, 2001 probably marked the high watermark of the Mark 1 Focus WRC program, with both McRae and Sainz in with a very real chance of taking either their second or third drivers' titles, respectively. Both were duly registered to score manufacturers' points, which left Delacour to do what he could in the third car. McRae pronounced himself unhappy with both the development pace and cycle of the Focus WRC before the event and also its Pirelli tyres. He even went so far to suggest that he might struggle to break into the top 3, and this would prove to be something of a prophetic statement. Then, of course, Mitsubishi. This Sanremo marked the debut of Mitsubishi's first ever World Rally car, the Evo WRC. This means that this round effectively saw the curtain drawn on the Group A era, at least in terms of its OEM involvement. It also signalled the end of Mitsubishi's all-conquering run of Group A Evo success, And while it couldn't have been known at the time, the end of Makinen's time with the rally operation. They had Makinen and Loix, obviously. Citroën, the Zara WRC had shown immense pace earlier on in the year in Spain, yet drivers Bulgalski and Jesus Puros were blighted by poor reliability. Nevertheless, the innate speed of the car was plain to see, and Citroën's decision to spend much of the previous year developing the Zara T4 had been more than vindicated. The team could, of course, call upon the services of two of the finest seal surface talents of the age, with Bulgalski and Puros, both of whom had exhibited scorching form in rally in Spain earlier in the year before reliability sidelined them. Rising star and junior WRC star Seb Loeb had been given the third Zara WRC, but not nominated to score manufacturer points, which of course would come back to haunt Citroën. Hyundai had McRae, and for this event parachuted in Piero Liatti, you'd assume as a sort of local hero and perceived tarmac specialist, or at least more of a tarmac specialist, and Skoda with the Octavia Evo 2 with Schwartz, Thierry, and Roman Cresta for this event as well. So
the best
three
car there,
Octavia
obviously.
WRCs. Well, of course. Although, and you know, we know that it wasn't exactly the quickest thing in the world, but it does. My God, look at some of the times in this. The poor bugger really is just like completely outclassed by these small, nimble things. You know, you've got McRae complaining that his Focus WRC is too long and unwieldy. I mean, must have Bruno Thierry peering in from the back saying, "You what, mate?"
Although, who was it said it to us lately that the Octavia is not nearly as big as we make it out to be? Someone kind of.
It was
Tony Simpson.
Tony Simpson. Yeah. Because he did the maths.
He reached out with some wheelbase lengths on a run. Yeah.
You can prove anything with facts and stats.
Where's the fun in that?
Print the legend, not the truth. And get ready for some butchered Italian pronunciations, because
next up on the countries we alienate.
Oh dear, sorry everyone. So SS1 was called SS1 was called Birodi. Jesus Christ, I'm bad. McRae was first out the blocks, but suffered from the off with understeer and the relative age of the Focus. He could only manage 7th fastest overall, a premonition of how the event would pan out for the Scot. Makinen's debut with the Lancer started very badly. He had an intermittent yet persistent transmission electrical gremlin, and he was only 11th fastest through the first stage. Didn't struggle as much as Burns though, who struggled with the cold Pirellis on his Impreza WRC, went off the road and out of the rally just 4 kilometers into the first stage. He said he was taking things relatively easy, but slid wide, couldn't find any grip in the middle of the corner and went off the road. Sainz said he was happy with the Focus development from McRae, could still only manage 3rd fastest, albeit just 0.7 seconds behind Gronholm in 2nd. Armin Schwartz in the Octavia had his efforts in Special Stage 1 ruined by an intermittent fault that cut power to the engine. This ultimately manifested itself as a goosed alternator. The lead Skoda retired from the rally while traversing between SS1 and SS2. Panizzi was unhappy as well with the front end of his 206 WRC, but still quickest of all in SS1, 1.6 seconds ahead of teammate Gronholm. Bulgalski's rally started poorly. He lost almost 30 seconds by pirouetting his Zara near the end of the stage. He knocked 2 corners off the car in the process, but was able to continue. He ended the first stage marooned down in 28th overall, but set about making up for his mistakes thereafter. Liatti rewarded Hyundai's faith in him by clipping the Armco and then sort of pinballing off the stage and out of the rally. Presumably much to his employer's chagrin. So not a great start to the rally for various WRC regulars. 3 works crews were out of the rally within minutes of the event beginning, or put another way, within 12 competitive kilometers. So yeah, fairly high rate of attrition from the off. Next stage, SS2, Langan. McRae was still battling with the front end of his Focus and struggled to find a rhythm, and with it a competitive turn of speed. He was 13th fastest through SS2 and plummeted to 13th overall result. Macklin and Loix found their respective Evo WRC debuts hampered by the same intermittent differential issues, with the all-important rear diff failing to lock in a reliable, predictable manner. They hemorrhaged time as a result. Macklin was 17th fastest through SS2. For his part, Gronholm was 4th fastest, but he said he could have been better had he not suffered from brake fade, which caused him to clip the rear of the 206 on a wall toward the end of the stage. He was very lucky to survive to fight another day. Panizzi complained that the active front anti-roll bar on his car wasn't working as advertised and was thus sapping his confidence, not that you'd have known from his special stage times. Equally upset was Oriol, who was very unhappy about being lumbered with the old 5-speed gearbox as opposed to the 6-speeder in the cars of his teammates. He was only 7th fastest, but still held 5th place overall come the end of the stage. As for Jesus Puris, he was fastest of all through SS2, 1.5 seconds ahead of Timo Bulgalski and 8.4 seconds ahead of Panizzi in third. He moved into the overall lead as a result. Puris would lose sometime in the very next stage because of a weird tyre vibration on the front left. It was only 5th fastest, but he nevertheless managed to hold on to the lead until the following stage when he was overhauled by a resurgent Panizzi. On SS3, Peugeot locked up the top 3 fastest times on the stage. Panizzi ahead of Gronholm, ahead of Oriol, Bulgalski in 4th, Delacour 6th, Sainz 7th. That SS4 brought more crushing Gallic domination. Puris 2 seconds faster than Panizzi, who was in turn less than a second quicker than Bulgalski. Oriol 2 seconds further back in 4th, with Loeb 0.6 seconds further back than him. Sainz, for his part, dropped down the order and was struggling for pace, and not as much as teammate McRae, who was still 13th fastest and only 2 places ahead of title rival Mackinnon, 16th. Come SS5, Nava won. Panizzi was much happier with his new non-active front anti-roll bar and used his newfound confidence to full effect. He took the lead of the rally on this stage, though this probably owed as much to ex-leader Puris being only 7th fastest. Bulgalski proved that Puris was by no means the only Citroen man in with a chance of victory by winning the stage by 3 seconds. Ahead of Gronholm, who in turn held a 0.1 second advantage over Panizzi. Loeb and Oriol were 4th and 5th quickest, respectively, to make an all-French top 5. For his part, Puris could only manage 7th fastest and slipped to 2nd overall, albeit only half a second behind Panizzi. Puris blamed the slip on his notes being overly conservative. There was precious little to separate the top 3 on SS6. Bulgalski quickest of all through the stage with a time of 7 minutes, 53.5 seconds, just 0.1 seconds faster than Panizzi in 2nd. Bulgalski was able to move up to 4th overall result, usurping Oriol at the same time. At the other end of the scale, we have Alistair McRae, who lost 10 minutes beaching his Accents WRC on a dry stone wall. This dropped him right down the order to 56th overall. And he was hit with a 50-second penalty for being late at time arrival. It would prove to be a wretched weekend for the Hyundai team, and McRae would wind up bearing the brunt of the team's poor fortune. SS7. Puris struck back against Panizzi on this stage, dashing through the 25.2-kilometre test to set a time of 16 minutes, 41.9 seconds. This ended up being 4.2 seconds better than Bulgalski in 2nd, and a full 5.6 seconds better than Panizzi in 3rd. Puris thus wrestled back control of the lead and would extend his advantage to a scant 1.5 seconds for the following stage, the final one of the leg. Gronholm could only manage 10th quick through here, dropped to from 3rd to 5th overall as a result. He blamed his lack of pace on poor visibility and an intermittent gearbox issue of his own. SS8. And the ability of the Zara drivers to trade fastest times continued, with Bulgalski winning the final stage of the opening leg by 5.4 seconds over his teammate Puris, with Panizzi 0.1 seconds back in 3rd. Oriel and Loeb set identical times on this stage, 9 minutes 17.1 seconds, which enabled the latter to overhaul Gronholm for fifth place overall. It lent the top of the leaderboard a decidedly Gallic flavour come the end of the opening leg. Puris in the lead with a 1.5 second advantage over Panizzi, himself 14.6 seconds ahead, 6 seconds ahead of a hard charging Bulgalski. Oriel 10.5 seconds further back in fourth, and Loeb 4.8 seconds back from him in fifth. McRae and Mackinnon both had awful opening legs with evil handling cars and transmission issues for the latter. The Mackinnon ended the day, they ended the day in 13th, 14th overall, respectively, and a long way off the top 10. Mackinnon placed much of the blame for his lack of pace on the unpredictable nature of his Evo's differentials. He described the issue thusly: "It was very strange because nothing like this has happened during testing, and everything felt good at shakedown. Basically, the diffs have not been locking, and although things were better this afternoon with the front and centre diffs, the rear was still not quite right. Hopefully the team has sorted the problem and will get a clean run tomorrow. Obviously, it's disappointing, but I'm encouraged that my championship rival have also had problems." So yes, leg two, Puris started the second leg as he ended the first by throwing it all at the wall and emerging fastest through the stage, this time with 1.2 seconds ahead of Panizzi. For his part, Panizzi was 1.9 seconds ahead of Gronholm in third, with local boy Renato Travaglia fourth quickest overall in his 206 WRC. In the process, he demoted Delacour in the third works focus to ninth overall. Further down the order, Toshio Arai ripped a wheel off his Impreza and retired, a foreshadow of the carnage that would soon come to pass. On the very next stage, that'd be the case. SS10 Molini. This was a bit of a dramatic carb breaker. And the first victim was the rally leader, Puris, who ripped a rear wheel off. He oversteered, clipped the left rear, and was out of the rally on the spot. Although if he crashed a little bit harder and a little bit further, he probably would have been down the cliff, and it could have been a far nastier incident. So we live and learn. Spain's loss was France's gain, with Loeb winning the stage 2.5 seconds ahead of Panizzi, who in turn was 3.9 seconds ahead of Delacour. It was his first stage win in a World Rally car, and in only his 10th competitive stage at the wheel of the Zara WRC. So, yeah, more evidence of his once-in-a-generation class, really. Bogolski clipped a wall in his efforts to catch the Peugeot of Panizzi and damaged his steering. He could only manage 17th fastest and dropped to fourth overall, and he had to deal with fundamentally compromised handling henceforth. He even spun again later in that same stage. Gronholm's charge saw him slide wide on a patch of gravel, and he also hit the wall. He was able to keep going, but both car and driver were wounded, more so than initially appeared. He'd spent a portion of the road section attempting to bend the rear suspension of the Peugeot back into some sort of shape. Sainz and McRae were making steady but not spectacular progress. Sainz was sixth fastest, McRae seventh fastest through SS10, while poor old Mackinnon could only manage 10th fastest overall and 10th fastest through the stage and was 12th overall. Marco Martin also came to grief on this stage. He blamed an incorrect pace note on his excessive pace going into a right-hander, speed that ultimately saw the Impreza step out and hit the wall. He was 53rd fastest through Maloney as a result, and incurred a 10-second penalty for being a minute late at time control. Delacour took advantage of the chaos to set third fastest time, moving up to seventh overall in the process, whereas McRae and Mackinnon were still fighting over 11th overall and well out of the points. The next stage, SS11, saw Bulgalski go after the vent. He'd managed to haul the Zara into the stage, whereupon he continued to do battle with its evil handling. This precipitated another slide into yet another wall, which damaged the car and prompted the fuel system to give up the ghost. Apparently, an electrical fuel pump issue put him out the rally for good. Oriol seized the chance to set fastest time on the stage, and the process moved past Loeb into second overall, meaning the Battle of France was well and truly on. Gronholm showed his immense talent yet again by netting fifth fastest time despite damaged rear suspension and what would later be revealed to be a severely bruised vertebrae. Sainz was up to fourth overall despite a puncture. And this was a case of classic Carlos driving with a clear head and with the focus solely on grinding out a points haul. McRae and Mäkinen still 10th and 11th overall, respectively. And even this largely due to the rate of attrition earlier in the morning. Yes, and still both Evos struggling with the intermittent differential issues. At service, Panizzi pronounced the big battle between Purus and himself over and seemed confident in a simpler path to victory, given he had a 30-plus second advantage over Loeb. Little did he know that the real battle was only about to begin. Poor old Gronholm had to have intense help from the Peugeot physio, while Subaru worked feverishly to keep Marco Martin in the rally. SS12, Oriol was perhaps overly cautious on this stage and paid the price. Loeb only needed to be fourth fastest to relieve his compatriot of second place overall, whereas a rejuvenated Gronholm was second fastest to move up to fourth overall at the expense of Sainz, who was still suffering the effects of a puncture caused by a super aggressive cut. Solberg set his and Pirelli's first fastest time of the rally and his first on tarmac. He moved to seventh overall as a result. This was still a very quiet and uneventful rally for the Norwegian. SS13, Napa 2, more Panizzi domination. It was quickest by 1.4 seconds ahead of Gronholm and thus seemed to be sitting pretty with a near 40-second advantage over Loeb, who was himself 2.7 seconds ahead of Oriol. This meant that Titanic squabble for second was in full swing. Oriol set fastest time from Travaglia on the very next stage. He won SS14 by 0.2 seconds, enough for him to move into second place at Loeb's expense, and with still less than a second in it. Gronholm was still showing impressive resilience with the fifth fastest time to hold on to fourth overall. McRae, Sainz and Mäkinen finally showing a decent turn of speed, sixth, seventh and eighth fastest in SS14, respectively. SS15 was Molini 2. Loeb was fastest by a full 7.7 seconds to retake second from Oriol decisively. It was a position he'd hold until the end of the day. And again, more ample evidence of his class and that he really was a once-in-a-generation talent. The final stage of the second leg was Paranaldo 2, and Panizzi was 1.1 seconds quickest on the final stage of the day to end the leg with a 34.5 second advantage over Loeb, who in turn was 7.3 seconds ahead of Oriol. Gronholm was a distant fourth, almost half a minute further back. Despite being only 10th fastest here, Delacour managed to take seventh from Solberg, albeit this being helped by the fact that the Norwegian clouted a curb and had to crab towards the end of the stage and then the road section to get back to service, which was pretty bad, though not as bad as poor old Alistair McRae, who lost the brakes completely towards the end of SS16, had to limp to the end of the rally and then set about trying to bleed the brake to restore some braking and stopping ability, but no dice. The final accent without the rally, and Alistair was left to count his blessings or lick his wounds in the middle of a town centre somewhere. His brother Colin was eighth fastest through SS16. They're still only 10th overall, while poor old Mäkinen was just 12th fastest and marooned down 11th. Leg 3. The final leg of the rally brought storm clouds over Sanremo and a pitch black early AM start. It's a tricky tyre choice as well, as though it was sodden at the top of the mountains. There was clear evidence of it drying out on the far side. So a bit of a sort of Monty type conundrum for the teams to battle and deal with. Loeb admitted to having never driven the Zara WRC in the wet, while Oriol countered that as Loeb was from northern France, he should have no problem dealing with wet weather and driving in the fog. So SS17, San Romolo 1. Loeb was fastest by 1.5 seconds, again over local man Travaglio, with Oriol and Panizzi only third and fourth quickest respectively, meaning the battle for the lead was well and truly on. Travaglio's speed meant that he took fourth overall from Sainz temporarily, while Gronholm's power steering failed and he struggled throughout the stage. He was only 18th fastest and dropped to sixth overall as a result. Mäkinen fifth fastest overall in this stage, so finally beginning to make some progress, albeit too little, too late in terms of a real decent points haul. The weather really closed in for SS18. The cold Otier, filthy weather, overcast, rain and fog at the upper reaches of the mountains, but again, a dry line forming towards the end on the far side. Oriol struggled in the fog and lost 17 seconds on this stage. He fell 23 seconds behind Loeb and lost any real hope of battling for second. Gronholm continued to battle with his power steering or lack thereof, was only 25th fastest, down to 7th overall in place of Delacour in 6th. Sainz chose his tyres wisely and drove like a pro to set fastest time, 0.6 seconds ahead of Panizzi, which again put Travaglia down to 5th overall. Marco Martin powered through the fog to set 3rd fastest time on SS18, 0.4 seconds behind Panizzi, 1 second behind Sainz. And so the penultimate stage of the rally, Sanremo 2, more wet weather, more overcast skies. Most teams chose intermediates for the final 2 stages. In this stage, Loeb was 0.5 seconds faster than Sainz to win the stage, but a full 21 seconds quicker than Panizzi in 6th, cutting the latter's lead to a mere 11.8 seconds with 1 stage to go. Gronholm was 3rd fastest, now with the functioning power steering. McRae, 7th fastest and getting quicker, moved into 9th overall with help from the high attrition, whereas Mäkinen went wide and slapped a wheel against a wall, bringing the Evo WRC's debut to a merciful conclusion. And one would assume that Mäkinen wasn't too unhappy to be done with that particular rally in that particular car. Not to be outdone, Mark and Martin had a big accident, and it's one that I'm surprised we don't discuss more. I mean, probably because probably because it came off the back of quite an eventful rally, and thankfully it didn't cause either him nor Beef Park any harm. The Impreza aquaplaned into a junction, flipped on its roof and travelled a full 50 metres on its roof down the stage. And apparently the incident was repeated by at least 3 other cars that same stage. Both he and Beef Park. The car looks properly minced. But yes, Impreza well out the rally there and then. And then the final stage, SS20, more foul, sodden weather with a dry line on the far side of the mountain. Panizzi under pressure from a resurgent Loeb, despite this being his first time driving the car anywhere. Both Loeb and Panizzi were slower than they had been early in the rally, perhaps understandably. Loeb was 9th fastest and the latter, Panizzi, 10th fastest. This was not enough to give Loeb the win. Panizzi won the rally by 11.4 seconds. His 2nd victory here in succession, meaning the old guard had held the line for now. Delacour won the stage by throwing caution to the wind, 0.4 seconds ahead of Colin McRae, both helped by Pirelli's wet weather performance. McRae's pace meant he took 8th overall from Solberg on the final stage, thus marking a decidedly flat and unremarkable drive from Solberg. Simon Jean-Joseph was 3rd fastest in a 206 WRC, 0.1 seconds ahead of Bruno Thierry in an Octavia WRC Evo 2. And so, yes, this was a case of outright French domination. French drivers, teams, tyres and cars occupied the top 3. Panizzi, Loeb, Oriol, followed by Sainz, Travaglio, Delacour, Gronholm, McRae, Solberg and Simon Jean-Joseph. Sainz came home in 4th overall and with it the only championship contender to score points. Pure class from the Spaniard. It's the kind of thing that the drive that I associate with Carlos, his ability to always take something from an event, no matter how poor it was.
Grind it out.
But exactly. And in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really change much. Title protagonists, Sainz excluded, failed to score. McRae, 40 points, Mäkinen, 40 points. Sainz now had 33 points ahead of Burns on 31. But yes, the reason I mainly selected it was because of the feeling that it was the old tarmac guard's last hurrah. Not that I'm saying that, it was all downhill from there on, but certainly I think this was the last rally when you would have expected someone other than Loeb to be a favourite for a victory on a sealed surface event.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. And although it did show that there was also the event that perhaps showed that Loeb would be the guy. One of these events that showed that Loeb would be now the replacement for these tarmac specialists, albeit he would more than just replace them. He would be the all
Mm,
round specialist, as it were. And then
exactly.
compounded again by, as you said, the main title kind of contenders and protagonists basically equalizing themselves by being nowhere, and like the heavyweights of the 90s, other than Signs, admittedly grinding out his
Yeah,
result, but a lot of that due to attrition as well. I mean, if you take the
yeah.
attritional results out of it, that puts Signs out of the points almost, I guess. Or close to being out of the points, and then you have the early Evo WRC, starting where they meant to go on by being dreadful.
Did
And
look great though. Not that that matters.
yes,
Yeah,
it does
I
matter to an
think
extent, but no, but even to the point where though no one really like people still lust after some good-looking shit rally cars. I don't think anyone lusts after a Step One Evo WRC. Somebody
no, maybe
must
not.
letters in the post, but answers on a postcard. But yeah,
I think what appealed was just the fact that Panizzi, here's me waxing lyrical about how it was Loeb's coming to prominence, but Panizzi basically besting all comers and fending off first Jesus Purus, then Oriol, then Loeb, the final bit in the fog. I mean, I think that perhaps given another stage or two, Loeb would have overhauled him, because in the penultimate stage he took, what did I say, give and or take 20 seconds off his lead or whatever. I think had he had a little bit longer, then this would have been his first WRC, well, his first World Rally Car WRC victory. Yeah,
yeah, pretty good. I must
quite
go back and
something.
watch that because it sounds like pure carnage. I'd forgotten most of it just with the sheer volume of happenings
Yeah,
going on. Yeah.
SS10, Malini won. Seriously, everyone's out on that.
Oh, to go back to Sanremo.
Well, you're not. You're going to go forward to Sardinia.
Yes. And and with that great segue, yes. So Rally Italy, of course, has been one of the founding rounds of the calendar since 1973. The event, as mentioned, has taken place on the island of Sardinia since 2004, when it was first won by Peter Salberg. I've chosen the 2008 event as my choice this week, when the island plays host to round 6 of the 15 rallies on the WRC calendar that year. Based in the eastern coast town of Olbia, 57 crews will contest the event on 17 sandy stages over 344 competitive stage kilometres. Junior WRC crews would fight it out alongside the top flight WRC entries. PWRC and JWRC were splitting the 2008 season, though both would be present for Finland as the support categories. Leading those entries were Citroen Total World Rally Team. This was a time in the World Championship when manufacturers could only field 2 cars, not just 2 point scoring cars, but just 2 cars per event. Sebastian Loeb was their team leader, with Danny Sordo on the other C4, which had replaced a very successful Zara at the start of the 2007 season. C4, which of course would go on to win 36 times between 2007 and 2010, along with 86 podiums. The BP Ford Abu Dhabi World Rally Team, say it 3 times fast, but brought the Focus WRC 2007 to the table, with Mikko Hirvonen and Jari-Matti Latvala the team's driver pairing. Current championship leader Hirvonen had won last time out in Jordan, and the Finn was looking like the only person who was going to put a real challenge up to Loeb for the title this year. Up next, Subaru World Rally Team with the Impreza WRC 2007, or the S12B to you and I. The last of the 3-box saloon World Rally cars before the S14 would arrive. Much upgraded from the earlier car, but not without its flaws, still remains one of my all-time favourite rally cars, having had a lot of exposure to S12s over the years on Irish stages. Still a great sound. Former world champion Peter Solberg was paired with Australian Chris Atkinson, who had been having a much better time of it this season than his more experienced colleague. Suzuki World Rally Team had stepped up to the big leads proper for the 2008 season after debuting their SX4 World Rally car on the Tour de Corse the previous year, and also giving it a run out for Rally GB. Longtime Suzuki driver Per Gunnar Anderson, who had won the JWRC with Suzuki, would continue his partnership with the team, and Tony Gardemeister would drive the other SX4. It had been a rocky start for the team in the World Rally Championship, with Gardemeister retiring in all but one of the previous 5 rounds, while Anderson had finished 2 rounds, not faring much better. Both cars marred by reliability issues and head gasket problems, notably. M Sport are running basically most of the cars in this event because this is the time where they also had the Stobart Ford or the VK Stobart Ford team. They had 2 cars with Gigi Galli and Matthew Wilson at the wheel. Both had the exact same equipment as the senior team, as it were, 07 spec Focus World Rally cars. Also being run by M Sport were the Munchies Ford team with Argentinian Federico Villagra paired with Henning Salberg, who had stepped in for another driver for this event. Down in the JWRC field, a certain Sebastien Ogier was out in the Equipe de France C2, along with some other familiar names like Martin Prokop, who would also be a staple in the World Championship in a kind of private basis throughout the years. Sebastian Loeb, boasting his best haircut to date, had crashed on the road section in Jordan last time out, allowing Hirvonen into the lead of the championship. He'd also crashed out in Sardinia the year before and needed a good performance here and couldn't afford to go off on these narrow mountain roads where there was little margin for error. Hirvonen stated prior to the event he didn't mind opening the road and doing the sweeping with the new Pirelli Scorpion tyre and seemed pretty confident going in. Do you remember that Jordan incident, Jamie? Do you remember what happened on that? With the Loeb crash?
I don't know, no.
Yeah, so he had a 34-second lead, and then he had a head-on collision with another C4 World Rally car driven by a privateer lad from Zimbabwe. The stage start and the stage exit were both coming up on the same road. So as Loeb was heading off the stage, this guy was coming up to the stage start, and they had both cars' rallies were ended with the size of the impact. Really bizarre incident.
One of those fluke things that only rallying can drop up. Yeah.
Yeah, you should never really end up in a head-on collision with another rally car,
No.
regardless of whether it's the road section or not. All servicing for the event would take place in the town of Olbia. Friday and Saturday would consist of 6 stages each, while Sunday would have 5, with a total of just under 345 competitive stage kilometers, featuring some of the longest stages on the calendar, with one of the Friday stages, or rather 2 of them, Krastatsa, being just shy of 34 kilometers. Mikko Hirvonen led the cars out on a sunny Friday morning, but it was his teammate Jari-Matti Latvala who set the early pace, running 4th on the road, going quickest by 7 seconds ahead of Citroen's Danny Sordo. Hirvonen claimed at stage end he had to be very cautious as it was so slippy he'd struggle to keep the car on the road. He finished 16 seconds slower than Latvala, so maybe opening the road in the new Pirelli is not quite as ideal as he thought it might have been. Loeb competed stage 1, 8 seconds up on the Finn. Gigi Galli was 3rd quickest, about half a second quicker than Loeb and 0.4 seconds off Sordo. Young teenager Andreas Mikkelsen was 5th fastest in an older Focus. Stage 2 took place on the longest stage of the event, the aforementioned Krastatsa, 33.96 kilometers of challenging, twisting mountain roads, including an early flat-out jump in the heat of the Mediterranean sun. And this is where Frenchman Loeb pounced, completing the stage 18.2 seconds faster than teammate Sordo, who was 2nd fastest. Rally leader Latvala clouted a bank during a rather big moment, picking up a rear puncture and losing his front bumper, dropping him to 14th overall, over a minute and a half off the lead now, with both C4s now in the top 2 places. Mikko Hirvonen had a better time of it than his teammate, but was still 20 seconds off the pace of Loeb while sweeping the road, though he finished the stage sitting 3rd overall, with Australian Chris Atkinson 4th, and Petter Solberg rounding out the top 5 now that Gigi Galli had also picked up a rear puncture, costing him around a minute on this stage, slipping down to 10th overall. Loeb claims 2 stage wins on the bounce, pipping a determined Latvala by 4.4 seconds, while Galli, also on a push after his own puncture, was 3rd fastest. And so as the cars made their way back to the first service, it was Loeb leading by a substantial 22.5 seconds over Sordo, followed by Hirvonen 38 seconds back, and while the 2 Subarus rounded out the top 5. The Suzuki team's struggles had continued on the island, and they sat with Gardemeister in 11th with a 40-second penalty, being 4 minutes late out of the morning service with a troublesome gearbox. And Anderson, who has previous guest Jonas Anderson sitting alongside him, had a 10-second penalty in 10th after being late out of service as well, and also had a spin early on in the day. 18-year-old Andreas Mikkelsen, after being quick out of the blocks, put the car off on stage 2, having a heavy roll, and retire from the event. Leader Loeb said in service he was pushing hard, but he also slipped in the usual, but the feeling was good. While Hirvonen said if he pushed any harder, he would break the car, and didn't have an answer as to why he was off the pace, other than being first on the road. Gigi Galli went fastest on the first stage of the second loop, just ahead of Latvala and Salberg, while Loeb and Hirvonen would post identical times. And for the second pass on the Crostazza stage, Hirvonen once again can't come close to the Frenchman. Danny Sordo, with intercom issues, managed to be fourth fastest, and Peter Salberg had now got into a rhythm and finished stage 5 and third overall, with Galli once again third quickest in front of immense local support. The final stage of the day saw Latvala get what looked to be coming for a while now, a stage win. 2.5 seconds ahead of Loeb, and another third fastest time for Galli saw the Italian end the day in 6th. Day 2 commenced on the 18.5-kilometre Punta Pianeda stage, now a bit wet after some rain overnight. Loeb was first on the road, but the damp conditions now would make the gravel and sand bond a bit together, so opening the road not quite the same challenge as the previous day. However, it was Latvala who topped the timesheets, still on a fight back after his early puncture, followed by Hirvonen, with Galli a consistent third, as Loeb was fourth fastest. Peter Salberg fell out of the podium positions after losing lots of time struggling for grip on the opening stage, remarking on the in-car footage while crossing the flying finish that it was undrivable, promoting Hirvonen into third. It was a Ford 1-2 again on stage 8, with Latvala getting another stage win, now leaping into fourth overall, having been 14th overall after stage 2 the previous day. Loeb could only manage third quickest, but still had a commanding lead of over 40 seconds heading to the final stage of the first loop of Saturday. Peter Salberg's bonnet flew open on stage 8, his day going from bad to worse, having to pull in and secure it. Stage 9 saw the Ford pair repeat the feat of the previous test, with another stage win for Latvala. Danny Sordo slipped to fourth overall after stage 9, with the top 3 now Loeb, Hirvonen and Latvala, amazingly just 14 seconds off his other Finnish teammate after his day 1 mishaps. Back at service, with lots of heavy landings taking place, Mikko Hirvonen and others were getting brand new suspension, and it seemed to work a treat on the next loop, as it was Ford's once again taking the top 2 times on stage 10. Loeb's lead being eroded slowly, but still having a decent buffer of 38 seconds. Galli had now climbed into fourth overall, showing consistently good pace once again. Suzuki and Gardemeister's rally didn't improve, as broken rear suspension had him exit the rally on stage 11. Latvala's searing pace didn't cease, and at the end of stage 12, he was dead level after 266 stage kilometres with Hirvonen, now just 29.4 seconds off of Loeb, who hadn't broken into the top 2 times yet today. Loeb, however, was happy with his 30-second lead, which he said was not so bad. Latvala had won every stage on the Saturday. So on day 3, with 5 stages remaining, including a super special, the question now was, could Latvala's charge end up with him taking the lead from Loeb, who would be opening the road once again? Hirvonen would take the opening stage win 10 seconds quicker than Loeb and 5 seconds quicker than Latvala. Loeb fought back on stage 14 to take his lead up to 23 seconds and buy himself a little bit more room after losing so much on the previous stage. Hirvonen was now really enjoying himself, and he was grinning at the stage end cameras, saying it was a fantastic fight. After service and into the last loop of 2 stages before the super special finale, it was the 4 drivers still hungry to chase down the Citroen of Loeb. The gap between first and second was now down to 16.2 seconds. Loeb just had to hold on, and despite Hirvonen going quickest on stage 16, it was only 3.3 seconds faster than Loeb, and therefore not enough to seal victory before the super special, which wouldn't really impact proceedings as per usual. The super special was won by Latvala to give him 10 stage wins from 17, but despite this, the Frenchman emerged victorious, 10 seconds clear of Hervinen, but performance of the weekend has to be Latvala, who fought back to finish just 14.6 seconds off of the winner, which is just incredible stuff out of Latvala. Stuff we've seen from Latvala plenty of times over the years, and it's really one of the reasons that this one stood out to me. It's just one of these ones when Latvala is pure in the zone. He's got the dark glasses on, and he's just almost, like a Terminator behind the wheel, just absolutely going for it, win or bust. And it was, yeah, absolutely one of Latvala's best performances, I think, behind the wheel of a World Rally car.
I agree, and the only thing I disagree with is the Terminator thing, purely because it's this kind of performance that he wasn't able to turn in week after week, which isn't a criticism because no one else could. It's just that he was up against the man who could, well, the one man who could, Sebastian Loeb, and it's, I don't know, it's drives like this that make me sort of realize how we all, myself included, thought it was a shoo-in that Latvala would be a world rally champion, and certainly deserved to be.
Yeah, and you make a fair point because there's a few of these Latvala performances over the years, but that's quite the thing, isn't it? That there's just these ones that stand out, whereas there should be, if not performances like this, but just ones that are just good enough rather than really stand out, and it would have delivered him a championship, be it at this time or later when he had the polo under him as well, up against Ogier. No doubt, like Hervin and ruining the fact that there was these Sebastians around to upset his title hopes, because I mean, both of those guys, if you remove, it's always one of these things, but if you remove either Sebastian from the equation, both Hervin and Latvala are world champions probably a couple of times over, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No question about it.
Yeah, so
to
that's
see old Gigi Galli. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, go on.
I was just going to say, good to see, or being reminded of Gigi Galli's scintillating performances. I mean, he was always a highlight of watching any WRC round back in the day.
Yeah, always put on a good show, that Galli. Probably capable of doing a bit more than he ever ended up doing, but was always a reliable entertainer, and certainly in front of the local crowds, he always seemed to pull out something extra special.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
good
yeah,
rally,
yeah, it was a good one. I do quite like Sardinia, despite obviously lusting for Sanremo. Sardinia's always proved pretty decent to watch in my memory, and I'm looking forward to watching it this weekend, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
So yeah, that brings us to the end of another retrospective. So this week, Rally Italy. We hope you're enjoying listening to these. There'll be more to come throughout the year. We have an interview-based episode coming up next, and we will continue our revisiting of past events as the season continues. Dare I say, Jamie, seeing as this is going out the Thursday of the commencement of this year's Rally Italy, who's your shoe-in then?
I mean, head says Rovanperä. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Evans. That's who I might put my money on.
Well, this time last year, it was very easy to say Rovanperä for anything. No, okay, despite like his performance last time out was
yeah,
superb. But he hasn't been. Not to say that he isn't a Rovanperä of last year, but it doesn't look like the guarantee that you just go pick him for every round at this point.
Exactly.
Now, I think if he decides to turn it on, he will. But also, Sardinia is still a relatively attritional.
It depends whether we get the Rovanperä from last time out or not, doesn't it? That's it.
That's the thing. He's too distracted thinking of all his drifting crack. They need to beat that out of him.
Oh dear. How about you?
Yeah, I actually think your shout of Evans isn't bad. I mean, although I think Tarmac is starting to get a grips with the Puma now, it's still not the quick car or the quickest of the three. But it's one of these ones that his road position will be relatively favourable. And it's one of these things that Tarmac is capable of kind of grinding out a result where he kind of shouldn't. So we'll see.
Should be a good event.
Yeah, I reckon so. So we'll bring this one to a close. And with that, it's thanks very much for listening from myself.
And thank you very much from myself too.
I will see you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening to Rally DNA, and goodbye.